are three of us here today on This Week in Cannabis Live. I am Jay Rosenthal. That is AnnaRae Grabstein and Marc Hauser. I don't even know which way I'm pointing. AnnaRae is, of course, from High Spirits. Marc, you are the Cannabis Musings guy. It's been a week, man. It's July 10th. Usually things die down in July. But as we talked about before, there is, some sort of hearing going on in Northern Virginia. Everybody's talked about it, heard about it. Marc, I feel like you gave us a sense of what it was going to be like, and it seems to be following that path. Any surprises from you about how it's going?
Yeah, well, I'm not there, so
I know.
I don't know, but based on the what I've read, not terribly, and it was kudos to you all for bringing on Natalie Fertig, who from. Is she still with Politico? Or she's ex-Politico, yeah, I guess.
Ex-Politico. It sounds funny.
Like
everybody else now is ex-Politico.
Well, yeah, erstwhile federal cannabis policy reporter, who is, it's always done a great job with it, and it's she did a great job of sort of summarizing what we all expected and what we've all been hearing, but it was good to have her have that sort of. That seasoned, political reporters sort of eye on it rather than others. And you also had, I'm blanking on his name and he's going to kill me for doing it. Gary Kaminsky. Thank you. Sorry. On, one of the lawyers, representing one of the witnesses. It was great to get his perspective on it too. And, I posted just about an hour ago, I sent out a newsletter and just, making the point again that remember that, when we read all these breathless takes of, Smart admits that, that their witness is wrong or something like that. It's interesting and it matters, but this is all setting up for the litigation. Right. And who knows how the what the judge is gonna put in the report at the end of the day. Who knows? It's hard to sort of guess as to why the DEA isn't doing that much cross-examination, and it's tough to navigate.
Yeah, AnnaRae, thoughts?
Yeah, well, so one thing that I've been trying to grapple with as I've been listening to all of the takes that I possibly can, and I am totally that person that is listening to every bit of content of anyone that's going there that has given it to me. It's like candy. Is that I'm confused about what happened with the executive order and medical going to Schedule 3 and seemingly skipping this process, and then this process continuing to exist and all the litigation that people are anticipating. And so what I want to do is ask you, Marc, to explain it to me, if you can, in that did the executive order make it so that medical could bypass this process? And if the executive order had been more broad, instead of identifying specifically medical, would we not have to be doing this? I just don't understand why one is okay and the other is not.
You've touched on one of the great mysteries of the universe. When the when the order came down, it was sort of this bifurcation was a total surprise to everybody. Particularly the people who were very close to the process. Nobody expected them to do this, and I suspect that what happened was. If you closely read, and not saying that you didn't closely read it, but one close read of the executive order, or the final order, I should say, from the DEA and the DOJ was that it was the Attorney General, is that that they really took a lot of pains to fit all of this into the mechanism required by the single convention, the UN Convention on Narcotics. From the 60s, to set up the medical benefits and this sort of whole process of selling to the DEA and then buying it back and the registration and all of that, all to fit it within that box, in order to play nicely with that. And that is arguably harder to do for adult use, which is probably what is going to get argued in the litigation if, adult use is also rescheduled. And so it was to try to bifurcate those two. I think on its face, that's why we had that split. Because if they had done it all at once, it might have been harder to sort of fit it into that box. And, it also creates this weird scenario. We've got, and I've written about this, is that, right now, the way it's set up is that if you are, if you register your medical state licensed, you enter into this buy and sell process, you are there's a very strong argument that you are no longer violating the Controlled Substances Act. You still have this FDA problem, but you're no longer violating the big law. And so for state licensed medical, DEA cannabis. And so, but, let's say we also get this result, a positive result on adult use. Is the DEA going to set up this whole other process so that all of a sudden adult use cannabis is legal? I mean, that would be really weird. I don't expect it. I expect then you'll have this sort of like middle, this place where it's on Schedule 3, but there's no DEA process. But then does that fit into the signal convention? Again, that's what's going to be litigated. But so I think may have also been trying to set up sort of anticipating that they didn't want to fully legalize, backdoor legalize adult use cannabis, like the way that they sort of have with medical. It's all really weird. I mean, but that's why I was sort of being flippant in response to your question, but I'm dead serious. I mean, it is a total mystery as to why they did it.
Yeah. Some context. We had Natalie Fertig in the room on our behalf. She's writing more next week. She wrote a little bit for our newsletter. She was also on. Can I show you what she played just to get the color commentary from inside? Well, she wasn't inside the room when she filmed this. Let me be clear. Apparently, it's very strict. Like she described, you had to like get greeted at the door. They walked you in. You could have your phone, but you couldn't actually use it. And she didn't have a laptop, so she's taking handwritten. No, she showed us. But here's what she said about being in the room. Let me just rewind it. Hold on.
Like going through it very methodically because they're trying to create, like both sides are trying to create a very specific argument. And so the anti side is like very methodically going through every study and like asking an expert about these studies and asking him about his information. And so it's a lot. It's like reading a bibliography out loud.
I actually thought that was a great analogy, like reading a bibliography out loud, which is actually pretty similar to what Gary Kaminsky said earlier in the week, and that the DEA was trying to make really 1 point. 1 point, really. That's what Gary Kaminsky said. She was talking about 2 points. But the first was that there is some version of there is one medically accepted use for this. And then the other point that the DEA was trying to make is nobody died from it. So like those two things. But to me, that's great. But like, I assume they've already litigated that in their head because medical cannabis is now Schedule 3. So Mark, what does those arguments mean that there's a medically accepted use for cannabis, but we're actually talking about adult use cannabis and nobody's died from it? Like, I don't know how it seems to be like, it's answering a question that nobody's really asking, but the DA and the anti-lawyers. Well,
that's the challenge here is that, I mean, the DEA, all they really have to do is, from what I understand, is just sort of set it up for one. They don't have to prove every medical use. They just have to sort of set up that there is a legit, there is a reasonable basis for this. I don't think reasonable is the standard, but there's a basis for this in order to get it on there. I think though one of the things that I anticipate will be challenged in court, in the litigation is that everything that's been established is for medical, and this whole process is about adult use. And so again, I think this is where, it isn't as much of a slam dunk as some are hoping it is.
Right.
To push back on the only for adult use piece, though, a little bit, it isn't just adult use, it's cannabis broadly. And so this would also filter through to the way that it's seen in criminal situations as well, as my understanding.
Maybe.
Because
but
it would know if
heroes-
someone was selling cannabis illegally and they were being prosecuted for that or getting in trouble, they would be getting in trouble for a Schedule III substance instead of a Schedule I substance, right?
Well, I should clarify what I'm saying. This hearing is only taking testimony with respect to adult use cannabis. That's what, you know. So the judge made it very clear at the beginning that none of, you know, the testimony is not about medical. And so when the judge prepares their report, you know, and they're finding a fact to issue to the DEA and the DOJ, it's only going to touch on the you know, that there is a medical benefit to, you know, to justify the rescheduling of adult use cannabis, which, you know, again, I think is one of the challenges, is that, you know, is that the DEA, you know, this is all set, you know, these are all benefits for medical, and they've already rescheduled medical. So how do you justify, you know, this as adult use? That's,
Stay
you know,
tuned.
I'm sort of, you know, opening the bag as to what, you know, I don't think I'm saying anything that the lawyers for the opponents haven't already thought of. So I'm not, you know, spilling any sort of like suggesting anything, and I'm not endorsing these arguments. Some of my friends at the cannabis bar might kick my ass.
Well, this is interesting.
This out loud,
this actually goes to Mark, what you said, and AnnaRae, what you said, because what we've learned, which I don't think I knew, but like the federal government can set what's on Schedule 1 and Schedule 3 and everything in between. And then many states default to that unless they take affirmative, you know, action to go against that or have to ratify that. But then we saw this week, Wyoming said, we're not, this is going to be Schedule 1 in Wyoming, no matter what, adult use cannabis. So like, so you're talking about if you were selling cannabis illegally, you'd be selling a Schedule 3 drug if it was a federal crime, but depending on which state you're in, it could be a different level of crime, right? Like
Correct.
states,
yeah,
right? They set their own, some default to the federal government, but not always.
You scooped my loser, which is the AG from Wyoming, Keith Kotz,
Nice.
for his lame affirmation of Schedule 1, no matter what, in Wyoming.
Though
so,
I think
super lame.
It'll be. I'm guessing that there is a, you know, that the law works that you can, you know, states can have more tighter schedules, but not looser schedules, is probably what the federal law says.
Right.
One other point I just want to.
Well, actually, to that point, Mark, imagine things stay as they are, that there is medical cannabis is now Schedule 3, adult use cannabis is Schedule 1. I don't, how you would interpret that in your own life is different, but like a state does have looser regulations than the federal government that has actually taken a stand against this. Like it's going to get more complicated. I mean, I guess the question is, by next Friday, will we know something from this hearing? That's one question. And then what will it mean?
Well, we won't know by Friday, you know, because it's going to be a while before the judge issues their report. So we're just going to, you know, I mean, who knows when that'll happen, but
how long?
Yeah, no, I mean,
I was wondering that same question.
Well, didn't they say after the hearing closed
going on summer vacation?
And also, aren't there briefings afterwards after the hearing? Isn't that what? I think that's
that's true. There is briefing afterwards to sort of set the positions. It'll probably be a number of weeks before we see anything, if not a couple months.
Yeah.
You know, the DA is probably not in much of a hurry. I could be wrong, but you know what? I mean, one other point I want to just make is that, well, two other points. One is you know, remember the states are flouting the Controlled Substances Act already, so it's, you know, it's not like much would change. But yeah, the other thing too is I know this is sort of a slight tangent, but I know I've made this point to my Cannabis Musings before, but I want to reiterate again, is that going back to this, you know, if we get adult use Schedule 3, but we don't get this buy-sell process and the DEA registration process, which again, I wouldn't anticipate, It could happen, but I wouldn't anticipate. It's going to be a lot harder to convince the stock exchanges to allow for uplisting for adult use cannabis and mixed use assets, because.
Sure.
And so I think all these investors and everybody's anticipating that that's going to be the result. But the problem is that no law firm's going to issue the legal opinion to bless that to the, issue that legal opinion to the exchanges. So I'm very skeptical that there's going to be this result that everybody's expecting if that happens. I could be wrong.
So I think that what you're pointing to is about the potential challenges for investors if adult use gets rescheduled but not DEA registered. I think, though, that there's a lot of other benefits that the industry is looking at.
Oh, yeah.
The one that I keep talking about is interstate commerce.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I think that is the thing that people are looking at to be able to untangle some of the web of ideas and concepts that they're playing with that relate to medical. And what's interesting is if the DEA doesn't create that registration process for adult use, basically it is taxing medical providers and not adult use folks. So the adult use people would be getting to skip the VIG from the government.
Wait, what?
Because the government is taking fees through that DEA process, and otherwise they're going to need to come up with some other way to get their piece.
But that's true. Though I mean, but the medical is then getting other benefits by being, by getting it, because in that situation, you still wouldn't necessarily have interstate commerce for adult use, because the you would only have it for medical. Because the reason why the courts have struck down interstate commerce, or basically upheld the state blocks on interstate commerce, is because it's illegal, and there isn't, and interstate commerce isn't. The dormant commerce clause and the benefits of the commerce clause don't apply to an illegal market. But with medical, you no longer have that argument. If for DEA registered medical, you no longer have that argument because it's not violating the CSA. Now, you may still have a problem with the Food and Drug Cosmetics Act, but putting that aside, but if adult use is made Schedule 3, but you don't have the DEA registration, you're still violating the Controlled Substances Act, would be the argument. And so courts may not actually still bless adult use interstate commerce. So it's also fucking complicated. But so I'm not trying to. I'm just trying to clarify what you're saying there.
Yeah.
That it is. Is that? But I agree with you that interstate commerce is one of the gold rings that we're all grasping for.
Right.
I totally agree with that.
Can we shift for a minute? Well, one, we will know. We may know something next week. It won't be more, and it's going to be a number of weeks, months, maybe till we know anything. That's like the most cannabis thing ever. It's on a timeline. We just don't know it, and can't predict it. And it may be major, may be minor, may have no impact. But there's other stuff happening in the same state because those hearings are happening in Virginia. Also in Virginia, there's now going to be legalization starting a year from now, maybe a little bit less. We had on earlier in the week Brett Puffenbarger, who is not me, even though he does look like me. And he had this to say about Virginia and how it's going. Then we can talk about this as an important state and what is coming in. But here's what he had to say.
I think they are very leery at big kid ag coming in or large MSOs coming in. It's very clear that they want cannabis from Virginians, by Virginians, for Virginians. Growing up, they taught us you're a citizen of the Commonwealth before you're a citizen of the country. And I think that ethos is very clear in what they have done right today. And I'm hoping that ethos carries through till day one opening, right? Hence why we chose Old Dominion as our name.
So it sounds like not they're trying to create a cottage industry. They are trying to limit MSOs in particular in the state or the Commonwealth of Virginia. And And one thing he said before, and then we'll ask you both about it. He noted that most of the time when legalization bills get passed, governors and most elected officials don't actually have strong opinions about it. They actually have not given it enough thought. Apparently, that's not the case in Virginia. The governor had real indications of what she wanted to see, what she didn't want to see, which is why she vetoed the bill in the first place and why it is now folded into the budget and it's going to happen. It's a pretty big state, pretty populous, heading south from DC. Like, I think those are all interesting indicators. Any sense of what's happening in Virginia, AnnaRae?
I think that there is a lot of excitement around Virginia. There has been. People have been investing in it for the last couple of years, anticipating this moment. So I think it's going to be a great market. That's the high level headline. I'm not sure that I believe that what Brett is talking about is going to manifest as reality. I think it's very challenging for states to effectively create strong walls around their borders in terms of who gets to participate in the market and keeping businesses out. I understand that as a Virginian that there are a lot of things about that make it seem like there's a great possibility that he and his business will win a license. And I want the best for everyone. So I hope that everyone wins in that. I don't think that Virginia is going to be able to close its borders any more than any other state has in terms of making it so that licensees have to be residents of certain zip codes or things like that. All of those type of restrictions have been overturned in other states by lawsuits. And I don't think that MSOs are going to let it happen, especially ones that already are there. But I think that Virginia is going to look a lot like Ohio in some ways. Like, I do believe that they're going to take a strong regulatory hand in terms of product approvals, restrictions in terms of the amount of licenses that exist in the market. They've set a limit on the amount of dispensaries, things like that. So they are potentially setting up a situation where having a license is of tremendous value. And so how they're going to distribute those licenses is really what the question becomes. And when you have so many limits on the amount of licenses, those licenses automatically become more valuable. And that means that people fight for them a lot harder than when you're in a more open and unlimited license market like Oklahoma or even New York. There's a ton more licenses, and so they don't have the same value. Whereas an Ohio license trades for many millions of dollars more just for a straight cultivation license than it does in New York. And it's because there's only so many of them. And those restrictions are going to inherently create that inflated value. And I don't think capitalism is going to go away in Virginia cannabis.
I think you're right. It also impacts, it also impacts the prices consumers pay when there's less of that competition and the value of the license goes up. It becomes an expensive place to buy weed, which is fine because Maryland's also an expensive place to buy weed, whereas DC is not. So it becomes a interesting market when the jurisdictions actually touch each other. Mark, your thoughts on VA cannabis? Well, actually, I have a banner. Let me put it up there. There we go.
Nice.
Yeah.
I love it. No, AnnaRae, summarized it, perfectly, and knows that market better than I do, clearly. I would just add that, to sort of touch on the point that AnnaRae made, is that this is this is one of those situations where you have the legacy of cannabis and the subculture of cannabis sort of running into the problem of how does it grow into the U.S. market, legitimate, on a legitimate basis, and how does it interplay, it's which is both fortunately and unfortunately demands that has these demands from these large well funded companies, and it's just the nature of the beast. And and the challenge also from the state's perspective, how do you find that balance where you're not, you're allowing other people to play, but you're also protecting your citizens and making sure that small owners don't get crushed. And that's a hard thing.
One of the call outs that Brett was talking about is the timeline. Like they sort of set a timeline to open, which is not them, but Virginia, July 2027. But applications are like due in February. It's unclear when they'll be given thumbs up. There'll be nothing on the shelves, I guess is my point. July 1st, even if there are dispensaries open, which we've actually seen in other markets that it takes a while for the supply to catch up with the openings of the stores.
I will just say that when states are thinking about how to foster small business participation in a new market, whether or not they're trying to specifically box out people from other states, I'll put that aside. But fostering participation from independent small businesses, equity operators, all of those things, really what we've seen across all of the states is the largest obstacle is capital. That is the difference between the big companies and the independent companies. And so if they want to foster participation, the way that they can do that is by injecting capital through, state level SBA style loans to small independent companies, because they can do that. And that makes it so that those folks can actually compete and participate. But if they're going to give licenses to folks and those people don't have access to dollars, there's no way that they're going to be able to compete with the large companies that are already there.
They can do that, but there's a big difference between can and will in this scenario, I think.
I'm just saying that if they're actually serious about Virginia for Virginians, that is the way that they can do it. Is they can put money in the pockets of those businesses so that they can launch faster and launch with actual dollars to support their business.
Agreed. It's now time on the show for our favorite segment. Are you ready?
Already?
Yes, already. We're coming up on 27 minutes. It is time for winners and losers. AnnaRae, I'm sorry I stepped on your loser. Are you okay with providing a winner and a loser, or do you want some more time?
Well, so you did say my loser, the AG from Wyoming. I've got two winners. The first is the citizen journalists and journalists that are showing up in Virginia. I'm just really grateful, and it's like cannabis news candy. So yeah, thank you to them for making videos and putting out articles and talking about what it's like in Arlington. And then the other winner, just because I like to see stuff new going on, is Glass House announced this week that they did their first hemp export from California to Europe from their hemp greenhouse into a CBD program in Europe. And I just saw it as a bit of a first, and also an execution on a strategy that they celebrated loudly and that lots of us were skeptical about. So they did the thing. They exported the hemp. So
you got a busy month.
AnnaRae, I know that they made some comments in the press release that this couldn't have been done without rescheduling. Do you know why that was? I couldn't figure out what the connection was. So
no, I'm not really sure what the connection is either, but it maybe had to do with their DEA registration that helped them get a number for their export paperwork or something. But I don't know.
Okay. Yeah, I was curious. I was, yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. Those are good ones. Mark, winners, losers, what do you got?
A winner, this is a little cheating because I just posted about it in my musings earlier today, but I'm going to shout out Kiva Camino, the Conan O'Brien podcast. Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend. Yes, they've been talking for a couple episodes about Conan, trying to get him to take an edible, and Sona, one of the co-hosts, talked about how she liked Camino a few episodes ago, and now Camino did the right thing and sent them a ridiculous amount of edibles, including some ones with Conan's face on it. You can check out the link online. They acted quickly. They had a good sense of humor about it, and and Camino got a shout out from a lot of press in in a very popular podcast. So it's that kind of stuff that it only helps the industry.
I am with you on this, and I'm going to go one level deeper because first of all, it's my wife's favorite podcast. So she came home talking about
Nice.
Soma and her cannabis use, which she always does, but then the podcast itself. And then I rewatched it, and they actually shout out someone very particular. And I think it's this person. Hold on. I think it's Melissa Henry. I don't know if you know Melissa Henry.
Yes.
If anybody does, she can let me know. She is trade marketing director at Kiva. They said Melissa at Kiva sent the package.
Mhm.
So it's not this Melissa, it's another one, but this one is in LA, and they said they actually showed up in person. So shout out to Kiva and Conan O'Brien and Soma. But in particular, if you had said, yeah, there's going to be almost a half an hour conversation, maybe more, half-hour conversation about a cannabis brand based in California that's not a paid advertisement, this is worth more than most marketing campaigns all told. And Conan even said they are not paying for this. This is not something that they have done. It was really, and maybe Conan will start eating more gummies, which I think would probably serve him well. But it was really great, and it was a great shout out in the Cannabis Musings. So get that in your inbox. But it was also an important podcast, an important moment. I don't think it's not rescheduling. It's not like earth shattering, but it is an important moment. I think being in the cultural zeitgeist with gummies is good. I think.
What are yours?
Absolutely.
What do you got this week?
Well, that was the one. That's why I snipped that picture. Well, I will say there's a renewed effort here because it's so local in Ontario to crack down on unlicensed dispensaries, and we've had this ongoing battle for a very long time, since before legalization to now. The same stores are still open, and there's going to be an effort to go after the landlords, which they've done in New York and some other places, and the penalties are actually quite high. So we'll see how that goes. At the same time, there's been this ongoing investigation about police corruption. So that's the winner. There may be more enforcement. The loser is there's been this ongoing police investigation of the police. So there's corrupt police happening. And one of the things that corrupt police have been doing is taking bribes to not enforce crackdowns on these unlicensed dispensaries. So it's all mixed up in law enforcement and corruption. So we will see what happens here. So our winners and losers, both local here in Ontario, because it impacts me. But yeah, those are my winners and losers. And by next week, we won't know anything, but the hearing will be done. So we'll have some react from, again, Natalie Fertig on our channels and other people too, watching everybody who's reporting from there, although apparently the courtroom is fairly small and sparse.
Yeah, not a lot of people are showing up. It's not convenient. It's not convenient.
It's not convenient and as Natalie said, she lives in DC. Getting to Pentagon City, she likened it to, I forget what she likened it, but it was like, it's as the crow flies, it's not far. As people in DC, where a lot of the reporters live, it's like the Netherlands. Like they're never going there. She said she went there because she knew if she went there, she'd go to the mall across the street afterwards in Pentagon City. So it was a fun interview. If you haven't seen it, you can check it out on our YouTube channel. Overall, one show note from ours, we have a webinar coming up on Thursday with our friends at Moby talking about investing in cannabis. If you are new to that, we have some CEOs we have C-suite folks from Glasshouse, High Tide, Kronos, and Verano. So check that out. You can find that on today's newsletter, but also on our website. Mark, AnnaRae, anything else to announce to our robust audience?
I'm good for today.
Great. Well, find High Spirits wherever you find your podcast. Go to Cannabis Musings. Mark's got a great Substack. Thank you, everybody, for joining us here today. We'll be back next week with the full rundown of what's happening in cannabis. Even though it's mid-July, shit's happening. I like it.
Sure is. Bye,
Great.
guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks a lot.
Bye, y'all.